So I'm sitting here thinking, as I'm chilling on the porch on a rainy winter night, how to survive 1985. Because at this point, I think it's fair to say that we have officially entered George Orwell's 1984, and we've since been in it for some time. So I'm going to go ahead and call where we are now 1985, which is how do you survive post 84, right? So things going on now. We got Trump talking about he wants to put a temporary ban on TikTok. He'll sort it out when he gets in. Apparently, his crimes that he was convicted for in New York, trying to pay off the prostitute um, to keep quiet. That's not something that's covered by the waiver, not the waiver, the basically blanket indemnity that the Supreme Court gave him. Um, NFL ratings through the roof, NBA ratings through the floor, uh, HIV on the rise, particularly in the foundational Black American community in cities like Atlanta and Houston. And Houston's one of those places, by the way, on another note, that as it stands now here, December 2024, that is actually sprawling and has a lot of good things going for it. And I'm actually consider moving to Texas, or let's say the South at some point, because I'm currently up north in the Twin Cities. Um, and who knows, right? I like where I'm at. We definitely got our issues. HIV on the rise, thankfully not being one of them. So the question is for the sons of America, for the people who, let's say you were born in 85 or in the 80s, or like me, I'm 40, but you might be 20, you might be 21, you might be 19. So there are a lot of experiences that you don't have, and hopefully you won't have to go through in order to get the game that you're gonna need to survive what's coming. Because a lot of what I'm able to use at 40 is to even project with confidence going forward is because of the things that I've had to survive in the last 20 years. The war on drugs, to come out from that felony free. Um, the prison industrial complex, to have escaped that. Um, the crack epidemic, heroin, and everything that brought to the foundational Black American community in the 80s, actually, when I was born. So I escaped a few purges in my time. So that enables me to kind of have a little bit of sound grounding. I got some street smarts, got some book smarts. You put them together, you can see clearly. Things that we're gonna need in order to survive 1985, you're gonna need sexual intelligence. You're gonna need emotional intelligence. You're gonna need financial intelligence. You're gonna need spiritual intelligence. You're gonna need intellectual intelligence, IQ, um, but not so much, right? There are definitely, you're gonna have to sharpen your sixth sense, so to speak, your intuition, your ability to read rooms, pick up on energy, read faces, maintain situational awareness, right? Don't conduct yourself in a way where you're just bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, walking through the world, not, just nothing more than prey, right? Um, where on site you have hyenas, vultures, jackals, coyotes salivating at the mouth when they see you. That wouldn't be a good thing. There are a lot of such people out there. You just make sure that you're not one of them. There are ways to improve in those various quotients. with sexually transmitted diseases being on the rise, particularly the ones that are the death blow, such as HIV. Um, you're going to have some kind of penal discipline, right? That's something you're going to have to develop as time goes along. Uh, for those, and when you're young, and depending on what kind of home you're coming out of and what kind of environment you're in, you may not even understand the concept of sexual discipline. If you do not, and obviously there's a spectrum that we all fall on as it relates to that, and I'm sure we can all afford to do a little bit better. You don't want to be going out with friends on the weekend thinking that you should be meeting the girl that night and that you should be bringing her home and sleeping with her. Rather, you practice quote unquote safe sex or not. I personally don't believe in the idea of safe sex. I think that sex is inherently unsafe. And it's not just for disease reasons, it's also for that was a cat I'm knocking down, but it was also for your spirit. You know what I mean? Just giving somebody access to any and everything that you got going on, giving them access to your most intimate self, everything that you've done, um, and they just toss it away like it's nothing, or you're just a number in a lineup. Rather you're male or female, it's just not smart. It's not good business, and it's at a point now where these decisions, though one could argue bad decisions were never smart. Fair enough. But in 1985, bad decisions are just so much more impactful, it seems, so much more dangerous. So at the very least, we want to develop some sense of awareness, some sense of caution, so to speak, on how we operate and how we navigate in these times that we can call 1985. Um, Religion, philosophy, morality, ethics, code, creed, these are things that we each have to work out for ourselves. At the end of the day, though, if the key that's gonna be the thing that's gonna be the key for each one of us is, for example, if you say you're Christian, then be that, right? Just stick to what it is that you believe in. It doesn't matter what I believe in or what someone else believes in. Believe what you believe and stick to it. Um, if your thing is ethics, philosophy, you have a system that you've built and that works for you, stick to it by all means. Don't break your own rules, whatever they may be. As often as you want to be really reluctant. If possible, you never want to break your own rules. You want to set a system where you can afford a degree of flexibility that works for you, and you're able to be consistent with it. Right? You want to avoid breaking your own rules. I can tell you, as a 40-year-old man, breaking your own rules is probably one of the biggest issues, mistakes, regrets. Not listening to your intuition, that inner voice, is a mistake that you don't want to have to feel. Right? That's something you want to have to avoid at all times. And you need to get to a position in a place where you can trust yourself, because you're gonna have a lot of voices in your ear. This thing, 1985 that we're in, it's getting ready to. It hasn't unfolded yet. I would say 2025 and forward, we're gonna see some things that it's really gonna start to unfold and move fast. Think about the way we put out news and information these days. Think about, okay, now we may all have some sense of ability to put things out as far as YouTube, Facebook, and these other platforms. But even then, that's controlled. There's algorithms that determine things, how far one may be able to go. So it's not always so clear cut. And within that world, the entities that are at the forefront are the same classic actors. right? The same classic TV channels, the same. They're not as popular on social media per se. However, their voice still holds and sways the most. That's changing to some extent. They're doing their level best to make sure that it doesn't. But it holds the most sway, particularly with people. If you're 50 or older, perhaps I'll even say 40 or older. That crowd tends to gravitate towards the TV and the mainstream media, and the messages that they disseminate. But imagine AI, working in a sense where you can release 10,000, artificially created videos. When we're talking about physical representations here, these AI sources can create pictures, and videos, and voices. So you have AI constructed people, voices, characters who are releasing videos, and one person sitting somewhere can say, well, I want to release 10,000 of said message, for example, and they can, and that's just one person. Imagine 10 people releasing 10,000 videos all saying the same thing. All of a sudden, this idea of what it means to go viral means something different, and it's more easily manipulatable. And I'm sure they'll pretend like they don't even have systems in place to deal with it. Part of that being the issue here in 1985, because now, what are you going to do, right? Well, we got human YouTubers and independent journalists and things running around right now. That'll soon be over. So when you're flooded with an ocean of artificial intelligence constructing media and worldviews and constant round the clock chatter of all types, and your whole world is formulated from what you see on TV and phones. You don't go outside very often. How are you going to know the difference between what's right and what's wrong, what's true and what's false? It's a problem that is very real and is seconds away from us. Not years, not days, not weeks, not months, not hours, seconds before we have to start addressing this issue. And for those of you who are a bit on the younger side, you need to be prepared to survive. So you need to be able to answer the question, how am I going to tell the difference between what's real and what's not? Right? What is real? Is it a matter of being plugged into a simulation and your brain understands it to be true in response? Matrix style, right? The Morpheus breakdown? Or is it something more sophisticated and meaningful than that, right? The hedonistic approach, we're really starting to see, the chickens come home and the roost on that, because a lot of people feel like, whatever, I don't even care. As long as I got beer, a ham sandwich, a remote for the TV or a phone or a video game. Listen, bruh, I'm good. All this about saving humanity and this and that, I'm not with that. And here's the deal. Truthfully, neither am I. It's not about, like, I have to save them, I have to save the world and this and that. It's not so much about that. It's really more so about saving ourselves. And the thing is people, we're connected, whether we like it or not. And we're at a point now where the level of disconnection that we're allowing ourselves to feel towards one another is just really unhealthy. How is it that you can live next door to someone? I probably got like several houses around me that I'm looking at right now, none of which I've spoken to. I've attempted actually to connect with, a fair portion of the people around me. The reach back has been minimal, and that's fine as long as I have some idea of the nature of the people I'm around. I'm pretty much good with that. We don't have to have the Wilson from Tool Time, not Tool Time. Well, I forgot the show with Tim Allen, with the where he had the kids in there. I forgot what it's called. In that show he worked on the show called Tool Time, but I forgot what it was. But his neighbor was Wilson, and he used to just give him neighborly advice or whatever. That would probably be the ideal situation as far as having a neighbor. But if none of us can get that, which most of us probably don't, won't, or can't, as long as we can trust that we won't murder one another in our sleep, I'm good with that. To be honest with you, I don't really expect anything more than that. We're not killing each other. We're not trying to sneak in each other's windows while we're at work. I'm good with that. I really don't want anything more. And I don't even mind smiling and waving. I think that's a great thing. In fact, that's a practice that I practice that. A lot of times, though, people are trying to duck down and they don't even really want to be seen these days when they're walking into their own house. They just want to jump straight in. And, I get it, right? Like, there are moments when you're just busy doing other things. I've been there. But I don't know. Like I said, I'm 40. So perhaps I'm from a different generation where it just seems strange to not speak to your neighbor. I don't know. You tell me. In fact, uh, dare I say that there's even something religious and spiritual, religious, um, in nature, the kind of relationships you have with your neighbor, your mother, your father, hell, relationships in general, right? But again, with the hedonistic approach, it's not that. It doesn't matter the relationship you have with your parents, the relationship you have with your siblings, your spouse, your neighbor. What matters is, are the pleasure sensors up? How did I get my dopamine fix for the day? And I'm sorry, not fix, but fixes at this point. I live in a city, in an area that has a pretty thriving fentanyl dealing population and who's of dealers and users. There's no Detroit, Chicago type situation, but we definitely got one or two things going on as far as tent city and people just homeless in encampments and under bridges, just pretty much getting high all day. And I've said this a couple of different times. The price. And again, look, listen, I've been around since 85, and here we are again in 85, believe it or not, post 84, George Orwell, if you're just tuning in. Um, and, haven't seen what crack did to inner cities, heroin, cocaine to some extent, but it was really the crack and the heroin just laid waste. In fact, many of us, our parents, are still getting high, right? One of mine is still struggling with that. Many I know have parents, elders, aunts, uncles, brothers, sisters, whatever, have passed into the ether off crack. But this fentanyl stuff, the price being as cheap as it is, has really just opened it up to something different. Something really sick, twisted, and demonic. Seriously. Where it just kills like the will to fight, it seems, right? Like people just being content with sleeping under a bridge off a $2 high. You know what I mean? Not even really tripping about a blanket and stuff. Like, they're finding people dead, frozen to death. So surviving this, one of the things that I believe needs to be in your tool bag is a love, appreciation, and respect for self, right? If you don't care about yourself, or if you're out here in the world and you're looking for someone or something to provide a degree of love and care for you that you are obliged to give to yourself first and foremost, it's not going to happen. And you're going to be nothing more than cattle for the. Now, for those of you like myself who haven't had the most functional upbringing, who've had adults as parents or around you, the majority of whom are not fully functional, to put it kindly, or not functional at all, and you've just kind of stumbled and bumbled through life to kind of get where you are, and maybe that's your situation now and you're a little on the younger side, so you haven't come to realize that you are responsible for loving yourself in a certain way. That's fine and fair. But by the time you're my age, there's one or two things you should have figured out by now. And among them, especially if you're going to survive, and not only survive, but thrive in 1985, you're going to have to love and respect and honor yourself. There's just no way around it, you know? And it might sound like, well, duh, but nah. I mean, listen, I'll be the first to admit that there's a lot of good going on. There's a lot of potential. There are a lot of possibilities in the world in which we live, especially if you live in the United States, and beyond that, if you live in the Western world or the developed world, and even certain parts of the developing world, like the Arab Gulf is a great place to be right now if you got some money and some know-how to you. Many places in Africa are coming up, parts of Asia. Believe it or not, a handful of spots, even in South America, are potentially good, depending on what your situation is. So there is some flickers of light out there. However, the reality is there are some dark issues that need to, at the bare minimum, be discussed so we know what it is that we're dealing with. We gotta know what it is that we're dealing with. And while there are things like secret societies and certain groups of people who might fit certain ethnic backgrounds or religions or one or the other or even both of those things, there's more to it than that. Because there are people selling out who come from every background, every religion, every faith, every culture, every creed, every code. They're all selling out. All of them. Right? If you, in the FBA culture, oh, you're not supposed to snitch and this and that. I mean, that whole thing went so far down the drain that it's even cooler now to be the snitch than it is the one who isn't snitching. The mob, Italian mafia got busted up. Which, I mean, these are things, I'm not saying anything new. I'm just saying those are things that have historically happened. And things have just continued to go down as far as organizations or people who've tried to do things haven't really moved in a way that they probably should have. And now we're paying a price. Not everyone is going to be as lucky as YSL, how lucky they got with those buffoonish district attorneys that they had down there in Fulton County. That is a scenario that most of us would never be able to survive. And even still, they were in trial, I think it was a year or two. The amount of money, can you imagine? It's crazy. It's crazy. The amount of money you have to pay to prove that you didn't do something, even though you're supposedly innocent until proven guilty, is insane. And I'll say this, as it stands, surviving 1985, I would be careful about any current creed, statute, policy, constitution, document that exists in the world today within any state, that could be suspended at any moment. And, all it would take is a declaration from a prime minister or a president, like we've recently seen in South Korea, um, some kind of a pandemic, which I'm sure is in line at some point, right? The 2.0 of that whole fiasco. There's a lot of good work that I guess those people who normally push that thing, they're busy right now doing other things, but eventually they're gonna circle back around to that. So you should prepare for and expect the 2.0 of that whole scenario, and prepare what it is that you're going to do for yourself during those times. Because again, I can tell you at 40, prior to the whole COVID lockdown, the thought of that had being a possibility of this kind of thing could happen in my lifetime. I never even thought about it. I never considered it one time. That, oh, I should prepare for if there's a global pandemic of sorts and the entire globe is encouraged to stay home and not go to work. What will I do? That thought never entered my mind one time until that event actually happened. And since then, I was actually overseas at the time and was barely able to get back. It was a challenge that I was not used to dealing with. I lost a lot of connections. My whole worldview shifted behind that whole experience, and a lot changed for me to the point where now, surviving 1985, one must have, at the very least, thoughts and ideas as to what to do and how to prepare for the next time that circles back around. And I say that in all confidence because of the nature of the times in which we live, where corporations are incentivized to do things to create revenue. And when you take God, morality, ethics, well, I suppose they keep ethics in, but their ethical code is whatever keeps the profits up. So their ethics and ours are not the same. The reach from their decision making, though, there is a famous local company here in the Twin Cities who recently settled a lawsuit for poisoning with one other company, literally all of humanity with these, they call them forever chemicals. Um, and they've decided to ramp down production of those forever chemicals in 2025. Prior to that recent settlement, they had only paid a $1.5 million fine for poisoning all of humanity with forever chemicals. Recently, they've settled, I believe it was for 350 million. Still, chemicals that were released beginning, I believe, in the 50s. And they, from the 50s, and then they'll ramp down production by 2025. They didn't even stop now. At their behest, at their will, they'll stop poisoning humanity with these forever chemicals, likely, as they say, in 2025. So that's just to give you a snippet of this 1985 reality that we're in. So that being the case, um, it demands a certain kind of ability to accept the ugliness of the reality in which we live, and the ability to hold value in the idea of doing what you can, right? Like there's value in that, and you're gonna need the ability to insert value in that. As far as gathering information is concerned, I'm a proponent of storing books as a way of record keeping. If you can get a hold of and stockpile actual text, if you can get a library or you have a place, a base already where you can establish and build from over time that you feel is safe, where you can have water well access and access to food storage, and preferably a nice distance away from major population centers, at least 75 miles, then great. right? Start stocking your books and things. If you're one of those people you like keeping things in the cloud, I don't really know about how that whole cloud thing is going to be working. I expect that at some point, this whole party of electronics is going to run its course, and we'll be back to carrier pigeons and things of that nature. So therefore, books are going to have their place, and if you take care of them well, they can store for some time, and they'll always have value. Rather, it's just you reading them, and your family continuing to read them for generations to come, or opening them up at some point in the form of a library, um, selling them, or whatever the case may be. They'll definitely have value. And I was looking at a book the other night, a couple months ago, actually. I think it was like 20,000, 40,000. I'm not sure what would make a book cost 20, 40, or 50,000. I did see something though. So there is a market for that. Now, I mean, a lot of them, of course, are cheaper. Nothing that you would need to read to survive 1985. Most of that you can pretty much get for damn near free at this point, right? If you're savvy about it, you're paying pennies on the dollar at the very least. Especially you get, even if you're talking medical texts, they write a new one every year so they can keep the prices high. Even though they change just pictures, very rarely do they change chapters and things of that nature. So if you were to get something from a decade ago with some marker writing or something on the cover page, or the cover of the book, hardcover especially, that's going to bring the price down significantly. And you're definitely going to be paying pennies on the dollar. So, it depends. If money's an issue, there's always a way. At this point, though, we just need a will. The will is going to carry you to your way, and your way is not going to be my way. My way is not going to be his way. His way is not going to be her way. We all got to go our own way, right? All of our situations are uniquely different, and the only thing we can really do is bounce game off of one another when we're in a similar space, when we're understanding of things in a similar way. Doesn't mean we got to be one-minded and monolithic and agree on everything, because we can certainly disagree to disagree, and I'm a proponent of that and believe it has its place. Um, but at this time, surviving '85, it's not a whole lot to disagree with at this point. Of course, you could always take the ostrich route. Ostrich eggs are a delicacy in some parts of the world, as is the meat, right? So I suppose if you don't see it coming, though, maybe it's not, depending on what your version of reality is. I guess that tells us a lot. So I'll say this, though. There's one word, and we'll leave it at this. There's one word that's really going to encompass everything we need to survive 1985 more than anything else. And I would say it's discipline. Stomach discipline, eye discipline, ear discipline, mind discipline, heart discipline, private part discipline. Planning discipline, ability to stick to your plan over time. So that's one word that you can use to catch everything that you're going to need. And from there, it's going to go into every other area of your life. Discipline is going to be key. Now, the reality is, discipline's tough, and we live in an environment, again, that just really discourages discipline in every one of those areas. You are not encouraged to be sexually disciplined. You are not encouraged to be emotionally disciplined, intellectually or mentally, I'll say, disciplined. You know, um, disciplined as far as your eating, your time. We're not. So it's going to take some will, some determination to build. And, one of the things that I learned from the game of surviving in America, what I believe is the essence of true American culture is where there's a will, there is a way. Um, yeah. So, you know, uh, a lot of us can do, the whole concept of what I'm saying as far as 1985. I'm just looking at some couple of questions I got. Uh, I was born in '85, but what I'm saying is that there's a book called 1984 that George Orwell wrote. And I think it's fair to say, for those of you who haven't read that or are unfamiliar with it, it's a book that talks about government becoming everything that, let's say, the founding fathers of America set up the United States in a way to prevent power from being concentrated and to prevent oppressive government from getting to the point where it can harm everyday citizens. So, 1984, what happened is everything that the founding fathers didn't want to happen. And there were people living in such an environment where they were betraying each other. The parents were telling on the children. Children were telling on the parents. Relationships were based on distrust. It's an evil situation. They did make a film. Of course, the books are always better. They tend to be better in my view. So I'm saying we're beyond that, bruh. I mean, listen. I hate to say it. I don't want it. I don't want that to be the case. I really don't. So I'm saying we're in '85, right? '84 has come. We're in the fascist environment, right? Next steps are turning each other in, parents turning in children, which is soon to come. I mean, you see how there was another shooting in Wisconsin a few days ago. 15-year-old girl shot up a private school, a religious-based private school, and they want to go after the parents. They went after the parents on a couple of different cases for that, and not to say that they shouldn't, right? The thing is, though, that it's not that they're really. I don't believe that they're really genuinely concerned and wanting to, hold these parents accountable because they chained up the child in the basement for years and created a monster or something like that, right? That would be one thing if that was the case. But these kids are just growing up like every other in most cases, and they're doing these things that parents don't necessarily sanction, don't even know. The relationships between parent and child, I don't think these days are very sacrosanct, right? Like you got to think if I'm your parent, but you're spending 90% of your time on TV, on phones, on devices, on electronics, you're getting all your information from the virtual world. The only thing you're getting from me, you may have got something in the genetic code, but other than that, morally, culturally, religiously, there's nothing about that child that is coming from those parents. For the most part, they've been completely raised by the system. Anybody who's been around long enough and you've seen or heard of Children of the Corn, that's another good parallel that we can draw to where we are now. These are pretty much children of the corn, And as a parent myself, I wouldn't call mine children of the corn, but I definitely have some issues with staying on top of it. And now, granted, one can say that that's always been the case, right? I gave my parents some problems, especially in teenage times, and I'm quite sure some of you out there are or have. So I'm not saying that just because you're a troubled teenager that you're a demon who's straight out of the depths of hell. I am saying though that it's not a matter of having a degree of curiosity and just mommy says don't go and you go or don't do when you do, but there's genuinely just cultural differences. I mean, check it out for yourself. Look at if you're in a room now. We're in holiday time. If you're around your family, listen to the conversations from about, let's jump 4 or 5 decades. So from 0 to 10, 10 to 20, 20 to 30, 30 to 40, 40 to 50, 50 to 60. Listen to the conversations and perspectives of people in those three different genres, those, let's call them generations, right? Now, I mean, they even have names, right? Millennial, I think I'm a millennial. I am a millennial, actually. And then you got baby boomers, you got Gen X, you got Gen Z. Um, but I was saying, if you look at people in the ages, every decade or so, if we're in the holiday time now, so most of us have an opportunity to view people from various backgrounds. So just look at your relatives every 10 years or so, every 5 to 10 years, that 10 to 15 range, that 15 to 25, 25 to 35, 35 to 45, 45 to 55, 55 to 65. And you'll see some interesting stuff there. You really will. Um, and, you know, with that information, do with it what you will. I'll say this though, all is well and it ends well. I do believe at the end of the day, where there's a will, there's a way. I believe the essence of the American spirit is about the spirit of I can, the spirit of I'm not going to stop, I'm not going to give, I'm going to continue until I hit my goal. And I believe that that's the spirit that ultimately will aid us and help us in overcoming the situation and surviving 1985. So, blessings and success to you wherever you may be. Salute, and let's make it happen.